Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Let's talk about math and The Brother's Son. So, first and foremost, if you've never heard of The Brother's Son, it is a show on Netflix that is an action, comedy, family drama, crime show. It is all of these things, and it's doing all of these things exceptionally well, and we're going to get into it. And we're going to talk about math along the way. You're free to assume that there will be spoilers ahead. I'm actually going to try to avoid major spoilers, but I want to preface the video with that just in case. So with that in mind, we're going to dive in, all right? So again, like The Brother Son is an awesome show, right? I dig it. I dig it hard. It unfortunately didn't get a second season, but the way that the first season wraps up is fairly conclusive. It just leaves it open ended if they wanted to come back. And I can dig that. It tells a complete story. And awesome. Okay, so let's get into it. I had mentioned the action in it. That's a big thing. It does the action exceptionally well, and it comes at it from a couple different angles, and I dig that. Okay, so first and foremost, wherever we're dealing with a fight, right? There's inherently math involved, right? There's math in the timing of your strikes and math in the positions and angles that you're taking throughout that fight. You're monitoring your speed, your opponent's speed, the same with the location that you're in battle, right? You're doing all these things, and that's just like the fight in and of themselves. And then you have the idea of choreography, right? So many things are calculated, right? So many things are specific. Um, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. So with this show, again, it's awesome. Starring Michelle Yeoh, Justin Chin, and Sam Song Lee, and they all do a phenomenal job. So with the older brother son, um, he's a gangster, much like his father, and he is very fast paced, very efficient in battle, being aware of his environment. There are some slips that happen throughout the series, but that's a whole nother thing, right? But his whole fighting style is very fast paced. He can utilize a weapon, he can utilize the environment. He's just being very aware of himself and what's going on. So that's Charles, right? Now, with Bruce, the younger brother, he is more improv, right? Like he does improv in the traditional sense as far as acting goes, and that impacts his fighting style. Because he's very big on using the environment like Charles, but you're seeing how he connects that in different ways, and I dig that. So it kind of reminds me of like Jackie Chan, like back in the day. That's what his style of fighting reminds me of. He's evading a lot. He's using the environment against his opponent. He's in and out and around things. So you have these different files, like different styles of fighting, and how that gets across to you. And all of it is math at the end of the day. The movements, the speed, the timing, the way it's all filmed, the way it all comes together, all of that is math. All of that is awesome, and they do the action phenomenally well. But that's not all, right? There's math in the choices that are made along the way, math in the acting, math in the voice of the actors, their motions, and back to the voice, like how high they're talking or how low, how fast they're talking, um, and just everything around it, right? They're breathing, what they're doing at any given moment, and with their motions outside of the fighting. Like, there's math in that too. And of course, like the fighting, like I mentioned, math in the sound, math in the light, math in the coloring, math in the filming as a whole, what they're filming with, how they're filming it. Just math across the board, math in the money that it took to make this, right? Just math, 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 and more math. Also, like I mentioned, the comedy element, and there's math in that too, right? Like math in the idea of a joke. The basic thing, the basic formula for a joke is setup plus punchline equals joke, and they play around with that. There's a lot of physical comedy, a lot of verbal comedy. There's a lot going on, and all of it's calculated, all of it's math, and all of it's dope. And speaking of comedy, like there's a direct shout out to math. So there's a point where there's an idea that because so we're dealing with different gangs throughout, right? And we're dealing with a triad, and so they have the idea of a square, right? Like a meeting. And so one of the characters, like TK, he's like, "Oh, I get it. It's called a square because it's the triad, and like two triangles make a square. Geometry's crazy, bro." Geometry is crazy. So I dug that. I dug that hard. So yeah, but there's math across the board, and I dig that. I dig the show. And I wanted to talk about my feelings like forward about it. Um, but I feel like that's also pretty clear. But I'm still gonna talk about it. So I enjoyed watching The Brother Son. Like my mom introduced me to that show. She's like, "Hey, I think you're gonna like this show." And she knows me pretty well, so I'm like, okay, and I gave it a whirl, and it's like, oh my god, yes. So with the Brother Son, right, it's 8 episodes, around an hour. It varies, but on average, it's an hour. Um, and there's math in that too, right? How long the show is going to be, how long it's going to run for, and there is that potential that something's going to get canceled, right? So it's like, well, what do you do? Do you want to tell a complete story? Do you leave something open ended? How do you want that to come across to the viewer? Right? There's math and all that, but in those 8 episodes, so much happens, and it's dope. Like I said, you have action, you have comedy, you have the idea of family drama, you have the idea of crime and the crime drama. So there's just so much in at any given moment. It's great, right? It's like it's organized chaos, and I like that. And the characters, even some of the ones that are just doing horrible things, some of them are likable, some of them are fun. And one other big thing that I want to say before talking about my feelings about the series as a whole, or continuing that topic, is the idea that like one of the big things for Charles is he likes cooking. And there's math all up in that, right? Math in food, math in cooking. Like with food, it's just like one, outside of the nutrients that we get for it, is like there's math in how it's composed, how it's cooked, how that gets across to you. And like he bakes, he makes a lot of desserts, and there's math in all of that. And what I like is like he's a methodical dude in some ways, right? Like there's some stuff that he does that's brutal, right? But as far as like the big picture stuff, he's pretty methodical, and that shows through his cooking as well. And he's passionate about it. And I like how you have these things, and it's just great. And also with interest, Bruce, I mentioned like he does improv, and that impacts his fighting style. um there's math in that too, right? Math in acting, whether we're talking about line reading or improv, right? You have to be very aware of what's going on. It's like, oh well, hey, what am I going to say, and what am I going to do in the moment, and how am I going to time how and what I'm going to say, right? And I think all that's cool. So it's like you have Bruce with his improv, and you see what he's doing with improv impact his fighting style. He's doing improv is the acting goes as far as the acting goes, but he's doing improv in the battle. And for Charles, he's a very methodical dude. This shows up in his cooking, and it shows up in his fighting style. And I think that's all cool. And for the mother, like Eileen, she does different things, right? She's connected. She's networking. She helped their father build their empire. And realistically, she built the empire. He was the face. He was the muscle. Then he ends up being sneaky later on, but that's a whole nother thing. But and there's math in that, in the networks that she's built, and the deals that she's tried to make, and the deals that she did make, and how everything goes. And so you have all this like gang stuff, and you also have a force lurking in the shadows that is trying to take it all down. And so you have this person versus this person, or this group versus that group, and it's all coming together. And I dig how it all builds up, and I dig how it ends. um I like that show, if you could not have guessed. I dig it hard. And I think it's worth a watch. And unfortunately, they didn't get a second season, but that should not stop you from watching the show. A complete story is told, a damn good one too. So you should check it out.